Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's PSE webinar on the topic of EV charging infrastructure, site selection and delivery. Everything you need to know. So we've set the bar high there by promising to give you everything you need to know. We've got an hour. There's a lot to cover, but we've got a brilliant group of panelists today who, between them, have got a really good range of perspectives and experience they can bring to you. So we will do our best to deliver on that title. So I'll just run through who the panelists are, and then we'll invite them onto the screen. Oh, here we are. So we've got Daniel Goseby, who is the Low Emission Transport Officer from Waltham Forest. We've got Krista Middleton, who is the Innovation Project Officer from Oxford County Council. We've got Sean Quirk, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Believ. And we've got Stephen Lloyd-Jones, who is the Sustainable Transport Officer at Epping Forest. And we're hopefully also being joined by Ian McLeod from EST, who's just having some technical issues at the moment. So what we'll do shortly then is I'll ask each of the panelists to give us a brief introduction to themselves and their background, and then we've got some poll questions for the audience, and then we'll get into the topic. So if I could just run around, I'll go from kind of left to right as I can see on my screen. So Stephen, would you mind starting and telling us a bit about your role at Epping Forest and where you come in when it comes to EV charging?
Thanks, Matt. Afternoon, everyone. I'm from Epping Forest District Council, Sustainable Transport Officer, as Matt says. So the perspective here to start with is that we are not the Highways Authority. So we've worked hard in the last 2 years or so. That's the time frame of when we've really been active in this, trying to get best use of our own assets. And to date, the primary activity that's led to something is use of our selected car parks by Instavolt for rapid charging. Because of our location, which if you were dumped in Loughton, you might think you were in London. We're just on the edge of London. 75% of our population is within the M25. We've got tube stations, red buses in the south of the borough. We're neighbouring with Waltham Forest. So that's the context. So it's been a very high adoption area. We've got the highest number of battery electric vehicles of any district in Essex, and expressed per 1,000 vehicles, it's higher than the adjoining London boroughs, 3 of them around us. So it's high adoption. Essex County Council are still formulating their position on street charging, of which there's none in our area at all. They've gone out to consultation and are absorbing that at the moment. They're going to reconvene with all the districts in a few weeks' time for the results on that. So that's the context we're operating. We're severely constrained in what assets we can use, but with a pent-up demand from local businesses as well as residents. And the most successful and the first install was at our Oakwood Hill East car park, which is a little used pay and display car park in a somewhat grim industrial area, but it's very near an M11 junction. London cab drivers head down the M11 every morning. It's been massively used from day one. And we've seen an uplift in our parking revenues at an otherwise little used car park. So far that's been a win-win. I'm very conscious that Instavolt ultra rapid charging does not meet all needs, and Essex's consultation certainly includes factors that we're going to hear more about how you address lower income people in flats, council house areas, etc. So we will need to move on from the ultra rapid, but that's a sort of summary of where we are at, Matt.
Brilliant, thanks, Stephen. So we've had the district kind of perspective there, and we'll kind of dig into that in the discussion that follows. Can I go to you next, Krista?
Hi, so I'm Krista from Oxford City Council. We are one of the original Go Ultra Low cities. So we've been implementing charging infrastructure since 2017. We now have 2 on-street providers, 1 taxi provider, and then in July last year, we launched our Energy Super Hub Oxford, which is park and ride with 3 suppliers, 2 providing rapid charging and 1 providing fast charging. So 6 suppliers in total for Oxford City. We will also soon be going into our Levi bid with Oxfordshire County Council and the other districts in the area. And what we've done through our experience of procuring in this area is we've set up a electric vehicle dynamic purchasing system, which, aside from being a mouthful, is a framework specially created for public sector bodies to procure their EV infrastructure, using all of our painful lessons that we've learned, and lessons that we have learned from sharing with other local authorities. Yeah, that's me.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you, Krista. And apologies, I introduced you as county, by the way. I've got a very small text on my screen. I've just written CC. Sean?
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Sean Quirks. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Liberty Charge. I've been in the construction and infrastructure industry for quite a few years, too many really. But within the world of EV, 2015, my journey started. So predominantly with Source London, so we rolled out in a number of boroughs there. And then from June 2021, moved to what was then Liberty Charge and continued that journey rolling out fast and rapid chargers.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sean. Daniel?
Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Gosby, and I am the Low Emission Transport Officer within the Highways and Traffic Management Department at the London Borough of Waltham Forest. For those of you that are not familiar with us, we're an outer London borough in the northeast of London, and we have a population of around 275,000 residents, and our area covers the town centres of Chingford, Hymes Park, Walthamstow, Leighton and Leytonstone. I have been involved in our EV charging point strategy and delivery for over 5 years now, and our current network is comprised of over 600 sockets. The network features a range of charging devices, so we've got the standard 5.5 kilowatt single socket units that have been installed into some lamp columns. We've got fast 7 to 22 kilowatt freestanding units, which the vast majority have been installed in dedicated build-outs in the carriageway, because we believe that if we're installing infrastructure which is primarily for the benefit of car users, then we shouldn't be disbenefiting pedestrians and other users of the footway. And we've also got some rapid 50 kilowatt units serving our town centres. And at the moment, we are on track to be delivering our 1,000th charging socket by the end of this financial year.
Brilliant. Quite a milestone there. And last but not
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm Ian McLeod. I'm a technical manager, Energy Savings Trust. When I began my role here, I was overseeing the administration of grant funding from Transport Scotland for the installation of electric vehicle charge points as part of the Charge Place Scotland public network of charging infrastructure across Scotland. So spent a lot of time sort of directly involved with the installers that are a range of different installation types. More recently, I'm overseeing the delivery of our electric vehicle infrastructure guide, which is a website which sits alongside the main Energy Saving Trust website, which is solely dedicated to sort of disseminating the information that is needed for anyone who's interested in rolling out public charging infrastructure. We gathered the information from this from a sort of extensive outreach exercise with various stakeholders from whom this is relevant, and we continue to engage them and continue to develop it to this day. Alongside this, we also host a regular EV infrastructure forum bi-monthly, where we get speakers from the industry to come along and share some of their insights and expertise. And this all kind of ties in with some of the topics that we look into and delve into in greater depth with the website.
Brilliant, thank you. To introduce myself briefly as well. So I'm Matt Croucher. I'm the EV Services Director at Believ. So we're one of the newer and fastest growing charge point operators out there, and we deploy the full range of EV charging solutions, anything from slow, fast, rapid, and ultra rapid, on street and off street. So yeah, just to recap on that then. So we've got in our panel there, as you can hopefully see, a really kind of good, diverse cross-section of experience and perspectives from a city and district levels. We've got the advisory experience from Ian, absorbed information from a wide range of stakeholders and lots of kind of guidance to share. And then we've got the hard-won, gritty delivery experience from Sean on the CPO side. So yeah, I think we've got all the materials there for a really good discussion today. The thing we'll do next is just to learn a little bit about our audience. So I'm just going to run a poll now, which you should see on your screen pop up shortly, which is just going to ask what organisation you're from today. So are you a local authority? Are you another public sector organisation, a business who are in need of charge points, a consultant, or other? It's just helpful for us as an audience to know who's in the room, so we can try and best tailor our responses. Okay, just give a few more seconds that to run. About 2/3 of people have voted. So at the moment, I'm not sure if I can see this on screen. So at the moment, we've got about 2/3 local authority, and then a kind of spread across the rest. So some other public sector, some consultants, some others. So, okay, that's most people have voted there. So I'll end that. So I think that probably appears about 64% local authority audience. So that's how. And then the next question was like to ask in these sessions is, how far would you say you've progressed in your EV journey to date as stakeholders? So again, really just trying to understand here where you're at in your journey. So anything from early days, you've maybe just picked up the portfolio to deliver EV charging in your local authority area or in your business or in your line of work as a consultant. Or you're maybe at the other end of the spectrum, you're at exemplar status and kind of really leading the way, or somewhere in the middle. So again, I've just got a bit of time there for people to respond to that. So at the moment, we've got about half the people voted, and it's about 40% of people early days. So just picked this up and doing my background research, looking for good practice and guidance. So hopefully I think you've come to the right place for that. 27% got the ball rolling, but lots to do. Completed some initial charger deployments, tried a few out in car parks, think about what comes next. Okay, and then we've got a kind of diminishing number as we move into getting there slowly, well underway, and some exemplars as well. So we've got a good cross section there. So I'm just going to end that and share the. So I've just clicked share results for that, so you can see what kind of split we've got there as well. So some got the ball rolling, but a good mix. And then the last question we're asking, and just we'll kick off some discussion, is should just appear on your screen now. What do you feel are the key barriers when selecting a site for EV chargers, or have been the biggest barriers to date in your experience? So depending where you're at in your EV journey, this will differ. Maybe you haven't got to the point of delivering yet, but you're thinking about what you should deploy, and some barriers there potentially around resourcing or funding or other such challenges, or if you are at the kind of nitty-gritty of delivering, different challenges apply. So let's give you a bit of time to respond to that. Clear front runner at the moment, sensitivities around parking and availability of suitable electrical connections. Probably two of the ones we'd have expected to feature prominently, so that's interesting. So yeah, electrical connection is now 50% of all the responses so far. How many have we got? Got a few more people yet to vote, so I'll just give you a little bit of time to think on that. So yeah, the options we've put here are sensitivities around parking, concerns over loss of bays, pushback from local residents, availability of suitable electrical connection, lack of footway width, commercially unviable sites or a lack of funding, or delivery challenges, so high costs or other. So I think we've got most people voted there, so I'll end that and share. So hopefully you can all see that now. So yeah, clear winner was availability of suitable electrical, something we can definitely dig into in this discussion. A lot of experience on the panel there. Sensitivities around parking, always a hot topic, parking, isn't it? Whether it's EV charging or just generally. So again, lots of experience we can share in the group there. And then quite even split across the rest. Lack of funding, commercially unviable, got 10% of the votes as well. So okay, lots of kind of discussion points we can pick up there. Just kind of looking at the responses we've had there. So the availability of suitable electrical connection, probably lots of people on the panel who can come in on that point. Sean, I'd probably look to you first, if that's okay, of your familiarity with digging the holes and making these connections work. what would be your kind of advice around that, and maybe sympathetic kind of notes on where you've encountered that?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, there has been a number of challenges. It isn't an easy thing. I think predominantly I've rolled out a lot of my charge points in London, where I think the network's obviously been maybe slightly better to work with. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's actually finding out what the power availability is and then putting the right hardware to it. I think with putting out fast charge points, I think that's been fairly sort of straightforward, because a 69 kVA supply has been quite easy to obtain from a DNO. And then literally from there, yeah, I mean, we have had some challenges where you go further afield into other DNOs. But yeah, so for me, it's around, that co-working with trying to find the power, and then working with the local authorities, because they know the lie of the land, to actually then work out what we need to install there.
So Neil, how have you addressed the issue where you've got sites you want to deploy at and there's just not power, or it would be very expensive to get a connection? How have others approached that? Does anyone want to come in on that?
Matt, I'll say something quickly. So we've taken an expedient approach because of the lack of on-street charging and growth in numbers. So one superficial or real appeal of dealing with the likes of Instabolt, or whether that be Osprey or the other ultra rapid chargers, is that they will look into all the DNO stuff and do the necessary works. So that's a particular case for ultra rapid charging. One of the car parks that, I mean, there's not much rocket science in deciding which of our car parks would be appealing to them. There was one of them they said would just be impractical, but we've done installs in 4 car parks now, and they've taken on that burden. So I'm very conscious, as I've said, of the risks of putting all our eggs in that one basket, and we're not doing that. So we need to move on to the next phase, and I'll listen to other comments with interest about how you'd deploy in lesser served areas, or where you've got no financial backing or ability to do some very expensive works.
Definitely. Just to address a comment that's come in on the live chat from David Pierce. So we're not just dealing with smaller number of charge points within EV hubs or service areas. It's very much across the board. And as Stephen's just talked about there, looking at rapid charger deployments or larger scale hubs in the context of Epping Forest. So yeah, we will be covering the whole piece. Did anyone else want to come in on that point around site selection and how you deal with challenges where grid connection is problematic?
Yeah, I could say a couple of things. So as I mentioned in my introduction, I was earlier involved in we're not directly carrying out installs, but with providing the funding, and we did have quite a hands-on approach to that. And there were certainly instances, particularly in some of the, you can imagine, more rural parts of Highland Scotland, where we really got it was a major obstacle. Instances where it just wasn't practical. The kind of cost of getting like a rapid charger in was just prohibitive, and in some projects had to be kind of shelved because of that. One that I've seen that I don't think any that we've been involved with, but certainly some like local authorities in Scotland, where they've been putting in a large number of charge points. One thing you can kind of do is have battery storage alongside it. If you can have a large enough battery storage to back things up, then that can slightly reduce the size of the overall connection that you can need, which can make things easier, as well as just the practicalities of actually getting the charging the connection put in place. It's also can lower your standing capacity charges. So that's those monthly charges that you have to pay irrespective of how much usage you actually get. If you can bring that down a little by the usage of by introducing a battery, that can obviously help a lot. I mean, obviously the batteries are very expensive bits of kit. We need some sort of quite thorough economic analysis and business analysis of that before you actually do it. So I'm not sure if we're, but just on a final point, I'm not sure this is purely looking at public charging infrastructure, but if it is kind of looking at things like fleet charging infrastructure for fleet depots and things. Another option is to look at dynamic charging. So there's technology that allows you, if you have sort of over the course of the day, you obviously have a sort of set amount of capacity, electrical capacity, but you may find that obviously you will find your overall demand fluctuates, and there'll be times when it's higher and there's times when it's lower. The difference between sort of the capacity you have and your maximum demand is your like static capacity. That's in theory like the minimum amount of charging infrastructure you could put in, just kind of, and not have to worry about ever sort of going over what's available. But if you have the technology, you could put in more than that and just make sure that you have the communication between your power supply and your charge points, to mean that when the demand dips, you can kind of speed up the power of the charge points, and you can get more out of them. And then when it kind of comes back up again, that reduces. And that's another way that you can squeeze a lot more infrastructure and a lot more charging into the same size of connection.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, Krista or Daniel, anything you wanted to come in on there, or should we can move on to the next topic?
I think from a Waltham Forest perspective.
Sorry, I don't know who went first. Go on, Daniel. Sorry, Karen.
I was just going to say, from a Waltham Forest perspective, we are a very urban local authority in London. Therefore, accessing the grid is not too much of an issue in our area. However, that being said, the faster the charging points you're identifying or considering, the more of a problem this has become. So when we have been looking at the rapid 50 kilowatts, or even faster the ultra rapids or rapid charging hubs, access to the grid has become something we've had to consider. So if I was in the audience myself, I probably would be selecting C right now as a holistic overview as to what the barriers are. However, we've just got around it by where we feel we wanted to put a rapid charge point. We've been able to install a 22 kilowatt with Believ. So we're still addressing the residents' needs and requirements for EV infrastructure. It just might not be the speed that we initially were considering.
Yeah, so you're responding to some of the grid constraints by kind of changing the type of charging solution you provide to fit within that envelope and in a deliverable way. Yeah. Krista, sorry, you were going to come in as well?
That's right. So I think my connection's not great, so hopefully you can hear me fine.
Yeah, here you go.
Not a lot to add, just two things. One is for our Energy Super Hub Oxford, which is in a park and ride on the outskirts of the city. We went with our own private connection, which I'll confess I don't know a lot about, but if you do want to hear more about how to do that, then I'm sure you can get my contact details and I can put you in contact with Tina Mould, who was brilliant and organised it all. But also we're speaking with a lot experiencing this problem, and especially those more rural county areas. And I think there are ways to go around it. I think some things you can do to increase the funding for those sites is to sell it off with a that is very commercially viable. So you can give a very nice piece of land or lease a very nice piece of land to one of your they need to try and implement some infrastructure in those more difficult, hard to get to areas. And the funding can help supplement that car park as opposed to this commercially viable one in the city centre where the connection is grand.
Brilliant, thank you. We got most of that. It cut out a little bit during that. So let's see how we get on. We maybe have to resort to turn the camera off or something, but let's see how we get on. It was fine for most of it. Thank you. Okay, so in terms of, I should add, by the way, if people have got questions, do feel free to, so there's an ask your question button at the bottom. We will, after a bit of kind of discussion, we'll turn to the Q&A, so please do get your questions in as they come to mind as we're going, and we'll try and get through as many as we can in the kind of latter part. Okay, we've touched on partly there as part of that discussion, the importance of selecting the most appropriate charge point solution for a given area or location or site, and DNO connection and is an element of that. Ian, I just wondered if that's something maybe you wanted to expand on. What other factors would you advise are kind of key for people to be thinking about when selecting the most appropriate charger type for a given location?
So yeah, for the kind of charge point that you're going to install, you really need to kind of consider what the sort of EV traffic to your area is going to be. So, if you split charge points broadly down to kind of what might be termed slower charging, so those AC charge points, which are typically around 7 kilowatts, they can go above 7 kilowatts, but often that can be irrelevant for a lot of vehicles, but they're capped by their onboard charger, so they can't charge faster than that. So those are people who it takes sort of several hours for them to fully charge their vehicle. If they're not just sort of topping up a small amount, they'll be sort of based there for a long time. And then on the flip side is, of course, the rapid chargers. 50 kilowatts has been what's sort of been the industry standard for the sort of initial several years. But in the last few years, we're seeing much more powerful ones, 100, 150, even 350 kilowatts in places. And when you get up to that level, you're seeing sort of 1,000 miles of charge delivered in an hour, which means that people can be getting a couple of hundred miles in just sort of 10, 15 minutes, which means much shorter times, the stay over times. So you got to think about like why are people going to be coming to your site? So it could be your site itself, what's right there, or just what's kind of nearby, and kind of determine from that, are people likely to be staying here for significant amounts of time, or are they only going to be here briefly? So if it's, the obvious example would be like a sort of somewhere on a motorway, where you probably want to kind of parallel the existing service station model. Most people traveling along there who stop to charge, they're on a longer journey. They don't want to stay very long, maybe just get long enough to get a coffee or something like that. So there it's going to be much more looking to get much more powerful, faster charge points. And the flip side of that, it might be somewhere like, obviously, a residential area would be an obvious choice where people are going to be leaving their vehicles overnight. They don't want to have to come back to their vehicles, or near their workplaces. So maybe there's a lot of commercial areas. It'll be going the other side. In practice, you may find it's actually a bit of a mixture between that and other things like, food areas where it's kind of maybe closer in between a bit more, or shops. So if you can, it's ideal if you can install a number of charge points and just kind of have a think about that and sort of try and build up a picture of what the kind of charger profiles might be, and sort of go from there. Just really factoring in what's kind of nearby and who's likely to be using the charge point and how long they're likely to be staying. And as I say, it's best if you can get a number in and then kind of have the ratio of slower to faster to really fast, kind of aligning with what the typical charger profiles are going to be.
Right. Okay. Did anyone else want to come in on the point of right sizing and how you deploy, thinking that goes around right charge point for the right location? Appreciate we've got a few different kind of angles within the panelists.
If I may, I'll talk about the housing stock. So I don't know if there's a definitive database of this, but our estimate is between 30 and 35% of homes in our area do not have off-street parking, and you can probably add to that others where it's not practical in terms of the age of the house, position of the meter, 3 cars already in the household, all that stuff. So there's that, and sometime, and I think we'll come on to this, but we want to make sure that people aren't left behind in this just because they live in a council flat. We still own 6,000 council homes, and we definitely get Motability requests for EV. We get van drivers saying, being just outside London, our fleet's changing to EV. We'll give you a free charger for home. I live in a flat. So although on the surface there's no overt regular request of any numbers from those areas, we think that the private sector, especially in the ultra rapid, is now filling the gap along with what we've done in our car parks. So until November 22, Epping, which is our main administrative town, had no public chargers at all. Since then, the Shell has put some ultra rapid ones in, Tesco's have put some in. So I think on the ultra rapid front, the private sector in our area at least is doing what it should. The supermarkets, hotels, gyms, etc., are beginning to fill the gap. They're a bit slow off the mark. So then we need to move on to how do we provide for the less obvious areas.
Okay, and on that point, I picked up in your introduction, Daniel. You mentioned around in terms of those people who don't have access to off-street parking, some of the solutions you deployed to overcome things where there are a lack of footway width on those terrace streets, and you're trying to accommodate local EV charging infrastructure. Do you want to kind of explain a bit about the approach you've taken there?
Yeah, so in Waltham Forest, all of our fast 7 to 22 kilowatt freestanding units have been installed on a dedicated build out within the carriageway. So that means in areas where the footway width may be a challenge, that doesn't necessarily become too much of a problem because the infrastructure is going to be in the carriageway. Therefore, the footway is not impeded by any electric vehicle charging point. All of our 5.5 kilowatt standard units have been installed into existing lamp column locations. So we're not introducing any new bollards or any new street furniture there. And it's gone quite well with our residents because when we consult on our charging point sites, we're able to demonstrate that we're not impacting you using the footway. And it seems to be, really, really popular.
On that point of resident pushback, well, not just residents, general stakeholder pushback, and the second most voted for challenge that our audience reference was around parking, and the concerns about loss of bays or pushback from local stakeholders. How's that translated in your experience?
Well, I think firstly, it's a bit of a cliche in this industry, but there really is a chicken and egg approach to EV adoption. So residents that do not have access to off-street parking are unlikely to ever adopt an EV if there is not a network of public charging infrastructure close to their home. And that's been reflected in our EV strategy. So we have stated that by March 2026, 80% of residents will be within a short walk of a fast charging point. We initially defined a short walk as 400 metres to be in line with Transport for London's strategy for proximity to bus stops. However, we have reviewed this and we now define a short walk as 250 metres. And to be transparent, the reason our strategy is for 80% of residents and not 100% of residents is the further north you go in our borough, residents have a greater access to off-street parking. So to tackle this and to understand where there is demand, we do have an online registration form where residents can formally request public EV charging points in their area. The form also asks about if they currently have an EV, if they're considering buying or using an EV, if they work for a fleet, so they don't own the vehicle themselves, but they'll still be an EV user, and also their current parking situation, and if there's any other factors that we need to consider. So to date, we have received over 2,100 requests, and this has been really valuable data to support with our site identification. And by listening to residents' requests, it does tend to have a positive outcome at public consultation. So on average, we have support from over 2/3 to 3/4 of our sites that we consult upon. So some of the reasons that we have received pushback in our recent consultations do include lack of parking. So as you mentioned, Matt, a typical street in Waltham Forest does feature terrace housing with little or often no access to off-street parking. So in those areas, we might receive some residents saying, where I'm meant to park my vehicle. But on the flip of that, we do also receive some pushback to EV charge points from residents that say, I do not own a car. And if we're going to be converting the public realm, why can't we be using parking space for things like bike hangers or cycle parking or even car clubs? And the third area that we receive some pushback from is the increased or perceived increase in traffic in residential areas. So we receive some responses where residents feel that we're going to be putting in something akin to a street petrol pump, where there'll be residents or non-residents from outside the area travelling to the street at all times. There'll be queues, maybe loud music being played, rubbish being thrown, those type of things. But in reality, we've never had a complaint from a resident at an existing site saying there's a queue of chargers or people using the chargers, there's litter, there's noise, that type of thing. And I think we've just learned from some of the responses to previous consultations, just strengthen our consultation documentation so that we're addressing some of those perceptions regarding electric vehicles at source. Therefore, when the residents receive the consultation papers for future sites, they're a bit more informed about the world of EV.
Really interesting. There's that disconnect between perception and reality, isn't there? Of what the fear is this may be versus once it's in, it quickly becomes a piece of street furniture like any others that it is suddenly kind of less kind of concerning to people. How does that compare, Krista, out of interest to deployments you've been involved with in terms of stakeholder feedback and responses?
Yeah, so I think one of the key things is, from our experience, we've learned that there is no one be-all end-all solution. We have, and it, again, depending which system you look at, but we have a huge number of residents who have no access to off-street parking. And as I think Danielle said in the chat, we also, in some locations in the city, can't install lamp column charge points. We do have some, but there's a move to move them to the back of the curb. Some of our pavements are tiny. So although they can be a great solution in some areas, in others, they're just not feasible. So, and we're aiming to do, have every resident in Oxford City be a 5-minute walk from a charge point. That's our aim. And so there's various other solutions. We've come up with build outs. So that, you could get rid of the clutter from the pavement. The pavement is still 100% accessible, or as accessible as it was before. So it's utilizing what you have and adapting for each location. We're also trying to utilize as much as possible existing car parks, whether that's council owned shopping car parks, town centre ones, or even things like community centres, schools. We're looking into all of those. They're there. A lot of them aren't utilised very much, or at certain times of the day they're very busy, but overnight, for example, they're empty. So that could provide a great location for residents within a few minutes walk to charge overnight and come and get their car in the morning. I think another thing that was mentioned is car clubs. And we also have a tracker for residents to submit interest in having an EV put near their house. It's what was used in our original phase 1 of our trial when EV uptake was quite small still. And now it's still live, and we get a lot of interest from residents saying they want a charge point near them. We use that to look at where it helps influence some of our decisions, but it's definitely not the whole picture. We want to make sure that we're putting EV infrastructure across the city, not just where there's high uptake now. But one thing that I think has been really beneficial is car clubs, in that if you're putting in an EV bay or an EV charge point, on a road that has high pressure parking, some residents, especially if it's in a low EV uptake area, aren't going to be happy about that being turned into an EV bay. All that's going to happen in their perception is that's a bay they've lost, and a bay that's going to be taken by someone else a few roads down to come and park on their road. So instead, car clubs are a great way to transition people. You can have an EV hybrid there, an EV vehicle there, or a hybrid. It allows residents to get used to using an EV. It reduces that traffic problem of, we don't want to encourage everyone who's got a nice car to switch to an EV. That is definitely not the aim. The aim is to reduce cars, and then hopefully the only cars we have will be EVs. So car clubs can be a great way of people trying and testing and building up that confidence.
And it's a good way. You already touched on the need to make sure funding is kind of targeted in maybe the commercial viability of charge points is lesser, to make sure that they do also get a coverage of charge points, and another kind of way to overcome that equitable access to EV challenges, car clubs, as you say, isn't it? It's a really nice model for that. Just one more question I'll ask the panelists, and then I will leave the last 20 minutes to go through the questions we've got coming in. We've got some really good questions coming in, so I want to make sure we have time for that. Sean, I was just keen to bring you in on this and ask for your take in terms of, so when we talk about site selection and deployment, there's obviously kind of various kind of guidance and kind of best practice or good practice standards, such as PAS guidance. Would you maybe to explain a bit to our audience who maybe aren't familiar with PAS, what the kind of principles of that are, and then maybe some of the kind of practicalities of where and how that can be deployed in practice in various environments?
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, as the panelists have all said, I mean, there is all that bit that we go through before we actually get to the build status, and everything's taken into account. Obviously, with PAS now coming in, obviously it's there to as guidance at the moment to make sort of all charge points accessible. But then that will sort of added challenges as well, as we've sort of just heard from the panelists around, people sort of looking at, reducing extra sort of bay lengths, etc. Where, with PAS coming into play, actually you're looking to extend the bays, where we're talking about making it accessible for all. For fleet drivers, if you look at some of the bay lengths, some bay lengths are around about between, I think it's 4.8 to 5.5 meters. Well, most vans are sort of 6 meters or 6.5 meters. So you're looking to try and extend the bays. Also as well, obviously, as Waltham Forest do, there's already the build out bit. So again, there's another 1.5 meters that you've got to try and allow, but then you've also got to allow the access so that they can get from the pavement to the build out to be able to get to the charge point. So yeah, it is. There's a number of challenges on that, and especially obviously with the dealing with public, they don't always look at that side of it, especially if they're not an EV driver. Yeah, so that adds some challenges. I mean, one of the things that we like to do as a business, obviously, is we do cover the whole of the area. So working with sort of local authorities, I think if you look at Believ, we've got a coverage across the whole of the local authority. So we do like to put a spread out there, but we also like dedicated bays as well. I think some of the challenges is with making sure that you provide a safe place for someone to park and use a charge point is pretty key as well. One of the things that, obviously, as I'm sure with social media, everyone sees lots of pictures where there's, someone can't get to a charge point because it's not a dedicated bay. And then you start seeing sort of 30-meter charging leads being sort of hung across trees and lamp posts, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, it's been I started this journey in 2015, and as Daniel says, it's definitely sort of that chicken and egg. And yes, you've got to build the infrastructure. One thing I've found is if you build the infrastructure, you build good infrastructure that people find accessible and they know they can get on, then that will drive the uptake. I know a lot of local authorities want everyone to sort of move more towards the walking, etc. But yeah, I mean, for me as an installer, as a CPO, I mean, I think it would be great if actually PAS became legislation rather than just guidance. I think that does add some challenges to when you're sort of trying to sort of create these larger sort of hubs with and on-street charge points with bigger bays and build outs, etc. So yeah, it's
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. So I think we've covered some good ground there. Let's use the last kind of 15-16 minutes we've got to try and get through as many of the questions you've submitted as we can, and please do keep them coming as well. Some really good ones here. If we can't get everything on the call, we will try and get back to you afterwards with a written response. So please keep them coming. So I think we've covered the first one from Danielle. So the second one from David Pierce was, how many electric cables can a road support with big infrastructure a challenge? So tricky one, as because obviously the available capacity and the nature of the connection is going to vary from one street to the next. But can anyone offer maybe a rule of thumb as to what might be reasonably deliverable in an on-street scenario?
I suppose we have when we're actually doing our sort of evaluation from our end, we actually have some guidance around. So that initial site selection that we look at is that we have some guidance around what size cable is in the ground. So we're able to download the DNO maps, look at the size of the cable that will give us an initial view of whether there is potentially the capacity there. Obviously, if you start moving in more to the rapid hubs, this, that, and the other, there's another conversation. But the initial view for us, especially for the on-street market, is that we do have some guidelines to sort of go, yes, we can get one of those. I would say on average that you are likely to get 69 kVA supply, which is a 100 amp three-phase supply that will run, 4 to 6 22 kilowatt charge points, etc. You'd get that in most streets.
And probably fair to just add to that, we that because most people will only plug in and charge once, twice a week at most, that bank of 4 to 6 chargers can actually serve a reasonable number of vehicles. So on a street level, that's a pretty good size hub. Did anyone else want to come in on that? Sorry, or should I move to the next question?
I just would like to just kind of reiterate that I think it's key to really think about the use case and how many charge points you actually realistically need on that. So we have, I think the most we have on one road is 3 on street charge points. And so far the utilization hasn't been a problem. And that's in one of our high EV uptake areas. If you can, residents will only normally charge once a week in the evenings, overnight. So as long as they can sort out their schedules, it seems to be fine for now, for the time being.
Yeah. Next question, also from David Pearce. We are mainly looking at locations in the council ownership to house EV service areas with requirements of 30 megawatts to 5 megawatts. We're finding that the local available capacity is challenging. So yeah, reasonable size deployments there.
I suppose the only thing I
anyone
could
care
suggest
to
on
comment
that, David, is come and speak with Believ, and I'm sure we can assist and do that. Again, without actually looking at the DNO maps and looking at that, it's sort of quite hard to comment. But again, we'd be keen to try and support you on that, without trying to sell ourselves on it. I mean, we offer a fully funded, and a bit like Stephen said with Instavolt, I mean, we arrange and pay for that connection and the rollout of it. So, yeah, with it, and there is the option of IDNO as well that support that as well. So yeah, there is. It's definitely worth maybe having a conversation with us if you would like to.
Ian, I don't know if it kind of plays slightly to the point you made as well around smart charging, the use of kind of variable supplies and so on to potentially depending on what the nature of these sites are exactly.
Yeah, I mean, presumably this is talking about public infrastructure, in which case I don't know that would apply so much. The dynamic smart charging is more for fleets where you know the vehicles, you have a good understanding of their use cases, and so you can predict well in advance when they would need to be charged and sort of schedule that. If you don't have that availability, those levels of control as with public ones, it does kind of restrict your options a bit more. No, it's not.
Yeah, I was interpreting, so it says house EV service area. So I was wondering if that's what you meant around fleet. But yeah, you're right. Yeah, maybe he's referring to public there, in which case it's a slightly different beast, isn't it? Yeah.
I would assume, I don't know, service areas is sort of a bit like current service stations and stuff, I imagine is what's meant. But
yeah, you're probably right. Okay.
But there is, sorry, just to jump in there, Matt, just a very quick one. So some of the hardware that we use actually especially if you're looking at the, if you want to call it that ultra rapid, is around that load balancing. So one of our providers, we are actually able to load balance across there. So when your cars pull up, the cars will actually pull at different rates. And the equipment that we use is able to sort of balance that out sort of slightly. So it does share what you've got. It does share across the number of cars that's plugged in.
Okay, I'm just going to jump to the questions now. So I've got one from Janie H asking, as a parish council with no support from a local authority, the support/financial assistance via EST was pivotal in being able to progress a project for fast chargers in the council's 2 car parks. Well done, Ian. The connection costs were significant, but with no other EV chargers in a rural area, were very much needed for visitors and residents with no access to roadside. I understand our LAs are not happy to look at lamp column chargers due to trailing cables. Yes. Does anyone want to comment on the different preferences we see amongst local authorities versus in terms of lamp column chargers and concerns around trailing cables?
Matt, do you mind if I answer the comment on the rural part first?
Yeah, go for it.
I put something on a related post there about Charge My Street, who seem to be some sort of social interest company active in the Lake District that have put in parish chargers and things like that. We've got some funding along the lines of UK Share Prosperity Fund, Rural England Prosperity Fund, and we're canvassing the thoughts of village halls and other rural communities for grants towards suitable, again, probably overnight fast chargers in parish and village hall sort of community areas. So as you can imagine, at the moment, our rural hinterland is a complete not spot for any form of public charging. So so yeah, that may be one approach. The social interest company Charge My Street.
Yeah. Okay. Krista, have you deployed LAMP part of your? Yeah. Do you want to come in on that? I mean, I think the trailing cables thing is probably a slightly unrelated. Suspect the reason they maybe aren't wanting to deploy lamp column charges is for other factors. But yeah, do you want to come in and?
Yeah. So I'd just say with the
Wind
lamp
Ox, for
column
example.
charges, as long as the lamp column is at the front of the pavement at the roadside, there shouldn't be any risk associated with that of trailing cables, or none that we have perceived anyway. If the lamp column is at the back of the pavement, then usually what happens is a satellite bollard is put in as well. So you have the lamp column at the back of the pavement and then a bollard on the road end of the pavement. So again, there's no reason for trailing cables. But if this is something that's a concern to them, there are a growing number, it seems to be a new one every month, of the new technologies that go on roadside or pavement edges, in addition to lamp column chargers. So there's a lot of great companies out there that are working in that space. If you would like to hear, I don't want to list them all. If you want to hear from them, then you can send me an email. I can send you a list that we've heard with or spoken with. So
Essex took a
Very,
decision
very
to
thanks.
move all their chargers to the rear of the pavement. That may be the Hertfordshire issue as well, but I brought to their attention, as you've said, that there are small bollards to bring to the front of the pavement, but jury's out on that.
Sorry, Matt.
Yeah.
I think just
Okay.
on the lamppost, I think the lampposts do have a place. It is a bit of infrastructure that there's have power, but I think that the key is if it has a dedicated bay, then you are providing someone a safe place to park. And I think this is the key bit around it, because then if you've got a safe place to park, in theory, you shouldn't need to run trailing cables further down the road where the IET code of practice and the touch potential, etc. Hopefully no one does, but there is a potential for someone to have potential electric shock. But if you're providing them a safe place to park, then hopefully, that won't happen.
Elaborating on that. So you're referring to the 2.5 meter, is it, radius?
Yeah, the
around
2.5 meter.
the designated bay. Yeah.
Exactly, and it covers the bay as well. So the idea is that in theory you can't touch two separate pieces of electrical furniture, because obviously a car plugged in is a piece of electrical furniture. And then that's there is a potential of someone actually getting electric shock. Again, there is this bit, but if you are providing, although someone will always go outside that and park somewhere, etc., at least if you're seen to be providing them with a safe place to park, then you're taking that risk element away.
Right, okay. I can see there's a couple of kind of comments on here. So not such questions. Oh, a comment from Keisha here. Hi, Keisha. Keisha from North Yorkshire. Not a question, more of a statement. And I think that trailing cables should be used as part of a solution, but will wide-scale rollout use of this approach not detract from the use of public charging network, quashing part of the business case for funding wide-scale rollout of public charging infrastructure? I think it's a really good point. The trailing cables and cable gullies point is one of many very live debates in the industry at the moment. Does anyone want to come in on that? Krista, I know Oxford's been quite active on that space, and Ian, you've probably had some involvement as well.
Yeah, so we have our gully, which is operated by ODS, which is a company associated with Oxford City Council. And I think, and there's a few other companies now with similar technologies or similar solutions, and I think they really can be game changing for allowing those who don't have off-street parking to charge at home. And we have some great examples from our trial of the gully. It was a couple of years ago now, but where I think it's two gullies were put in on the street, where there were two EVs on the street they were put there because EV uptake was so small. It was a trial, so residents could request them. And what happened on that street is EV uptake boomed. You know, we walk down that road now and it's hard not to see an EV. And just with those 2 home chargers, those 2 gullies, they've set up a WhatsApp group for their road, and they have a schedule for each night who's going to use the charge point. So that has taken, you know, we could have put in a couple of on-street that road, and it would have had the same effect as just putting in these 2 gullies. So I think there is definitely a technology or solution to look out for.
Did that come off their housing supply, Krista? Does that come off the grid, or does that come off the houses?
Yeah, so they have a home charger just as standard. The only difference is the cable, instead of going across the pavement, it works the same as a drainage channel. So if you walk down the pavement, you'll see it's basically exactly the same bit of equipment. But you pop your cable into that so it doesn't trail. Very simple. And it comes off your own home energy. So cheap.
So does that person then become a charge point operator that's got the charge point in their garden that they're then renting out? Are they a charge point operator?
Yeah, there's various associated apps that you can get, which will basically help you meter who's using your energy, and then it all works through the app, kind of like a car share system, but for a charge point. So those people who have their home chargers will be reimbursed for their energy that's been used.
I just got one again. Just sorry, I mean, it sounds like we're not giving people any. So again, it's just me trying to understand this as well. And one of the things, so obviously with on-street parking, in theory, everyone should be able to park in the road. Does then that create? Have you had someone? Does that, or has it created a problem where people then think they're entitled to park outside that house or that gully purely because they've got an EV?
We haven't had any incidents like that. It's a concern that a lot of people have, especially with gullies, that they're not going to be able to park outside their house. But going back to the use case, most people need to charge once a week. So we found that in most scenarios, people are able to work around that, and actually kind of enabled a nice community spirit, which is quite nice.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna. We've got 4 more questions in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So what I'm thinking to do is I'm going to very ambitiously going to try and rattle through these and ask for kind of quick, kind of 2-3 word responses. I don't know whether the questions lend themselves to that. Let's see. So the first one is from Fraser Cavill. Our model is to implement residential charging sites comprising of 22 kilowatt chargers on council-owned car parks close to residential areas. On-street is an unviable option for us. We are a highly deprived borough, and therefore antisocial criminal behaviour will be something to consider. Are you able to share any knowledge or experience on realistically mitigating vandalism or damage to EV charging equipment? Well, I know, Sean, you can certainly talk to this very briefly, if that's okay, though.
Exactly. I mean, we've had some. How do you stop it? I don't know, but I think we've obviously, along with the guidelines around safe charge, etc. Would CCTV be an answer potentially to do that? And do you actually look at putting a more robust charge point in there? But again, we know charge points can actually be messed up by a Cadbury's cream egg as well. I mean, I don't think there's any answer, but again, would love to carry on the conversation after the call.
We've got CCTV and lighting in our car parks. Plus, I think you'd need a large object to get into the Instavolt chargers, but
Okay. Duncan Howes, what are the routes for charities/small business owners to receive a grant to install for the install costs of an EV charger? Anyone want to come in on that?
There are workplace grants, aren't there, Matt? You would know more about that than I do. There's workplace grants for EV charging.
There are, and you may be able to get a fully funded charge point deployed as well, depending on the site and the nature of how it's accessed and how you want to use it. You probably are able to attract it. Feel free to pick up with us afterwards. I'm happy to discuss that further. Not sure if anyone else wants to come in on that as well, but I had a question to you, Krista. Christian Dryden. Krista, can you share the apps you talked about? So I think that's like kind of the charge sharing ones, isn't it? So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. There's a number.
Fine.
So I've put my email in the chat. So if you send an email to that, we can get info with you or have a meeting to discuss how it's worked for us, if that's helpful.
Brilliant. Okay. 2 more questions. Duncan Howes, would a standard 100 amp small business domestic type supply be sufficient for use of a 7.2 kilowatt charger? We're a charity intending to install one 7.2 kilowatt charger at our premise.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, depending on what you've got else coming off of that supply, I would say that you could do that. And again, depending on when you charge, I mean, I have a 7 kilowatt charge point at my house, and yeah, that runs fine. I tend to charge overnight, so yeah.
Good. Doing well. And dual day, last question. Do double charge points tend to share charging load when 2 cars charge at the same time?
Depending on a quick answer, depending on the model of charge point you use, then yes, they can share.
Okay, we got through my ambitious aim of those 4 questions in a couple of minutes. So well done, everyone. Good kind of quick, concise answers there. So it just remains for me to then thank our panelists for giving us an hour of their time to share their experience with you all today on site selection and delivery and how you overcome some of those challenges. We'll take away a few actions to send through those further bits of information. Oh, and there is one more poll we always like to run, which is just to say if you would benefit from a one-to-one to discuss anything further. So Sean's already offered to
more than
have some
happy.
further discussions with people based on the questions that have come in. Do feel free to reach out to us or indeed any of the panelists, and I'm sure we'd all be happy to help you with stuff we've not had time to cover any further in the session. So yeah, thank you again to our panelists, and yeah, I hope you're able to join us for the next session. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.